Hi, welcome or welcome back. If you haven't been with us in a while, or if you've taken advantage of the summer to travel, or if you're tuning in from any place at all, welcome. It's always good to be together. I hope this has been a good week and that whatever challenges or difficulties or unpleasantness you may have faced was relatively short-lived. Let me rephrase that a bit more realistically. I hope that whatever you may have faced, you felt sufficiently competent or well prepared to handle. This week, I came across several suggestions for dealing with stress in an article I had set aside some time ago with the idea that it could be potentially helpful to us. The article is entitled, Elect Stress Reduction, Picking Ways to Cope. The very first suggestion, and I look forward to sharing others in the coming weeks, is to interrupt yourself. Not surprisingly, I love this suggestion as it recommends the following. As you feel your anxiety level rising, try to practice self-interruption. Go for a walk, call a friend, run an errand. Just move your body and become aware of your breathing. Or I would say, take a break to breathe. How many of us know that state when we become absolutely consumed with a worry or a concern or a fear? Our heart rate increases, our breathing becomes shallow, our mind works overtime, imagining any number of disastrous scenarios that we are sure will come to pass. Anxiety is a stubborn companion. It is the overwhelming nature of it that makes it particularly defeating. It pushes everything else out. Common sense, perspective, a realistic assessment of the problem. Interruption is exactly what anxiety and stress and any kind of unhelpful preoccupation needs. So let us interrupt ourselves and take our first break to breathe. Let us take a meditative posture that perhaps feels different than the posture we were in when we started, or that is our normal fallback. So let's take that suggestion of interrupting ourselves by moving a bit to find that posture, to adopt a different attitude, perhaps, or point of view. Let us see if we can find those places in our bodies that are victims of our anxiety and stress. This is what I always like to call taking inventory. And as we do, as we find those places, let us soften them or release them. So, with feet planted firmly on the ground and feeling that ground underneath, and with our backs not tensed erect, but sitting attentively and with engagement, and yet with ease. Seems like polar opposites, but I think it's doable. And let us rest our hands in our laps, trying to unfidget them. And I always close my eyes instinctively, and whatever feels good to you. Close your eyes or focus softly on something in the near distance that doesn't really need your attention. And let us soften the outsides and the insides, particularly, of our bodies. From the tops of our heads, or we might feel a string kind of calling us to attention, but not with tension or strain. Let us let go of the furrows on our brows. Try to wiggle our ears. Release our jaws. And if a yawn comes, that's a good thing. Enjoy that yawn. Allow it to become part of your whole body, because that is a release. Let us loosen our tongues inside our mouths. Allow our lips even to slacken a bit. And then our necks. They always deserve a roll. Oh. And always are accompanied, well, in my case anyway, with a soundtrack of scrunches and crunches. I guess crunches is the word. Oh my. It does feel good. Let us lift our shoulders, even squeeze them up to our ears so that we can release them and feel them, even at this point, soften and let go. I kind of flap my arms, my elbows, my forearms, and twirl my wrists and my hands, wiggle my fingers. Anything that makes me aware but also allows me to soften whatever tension I may be holding on to in any of my limbs. And going back to our necks, let us go inside and soften our digestive systems, our tummies. Just kind of let them go. If you're holding them in or sucking them in, just let it go. Nobody's watching. Nobody knows. Just let your tummies out. Let them take a breather. And your waists and hips will do the same. Our thighs, we can kind of wave them back and forth. Knees as well. Lower legs. And you might want to lift the soles of your feet up off the ground, or twirl your ankles. Wiggle your toes. Dig them into the beach. That's another meditative technique. To imagine yourself someplace that you love, a place you love to be, where you feel a oneness. You, your body, your surroundings. Nothing's fighting in that place. For some, it would be a beach with water. For some it would be a mountain with the trees, with the wind blowing through the trees, and the trees, just the leaves fluttering in that wind and the branches fluttering. And wherever you may be, and you can be right where you are. Let us take a deep breath into those spaces that are now soft and pliable and open to our breath coming into our bodies. We're not fighting anything. Oh, so we take it into all those corners, all the corners of our beings. We fill them up. And when we can feel that fullness, take a quick little breath more and hold on to it. Enjoy it. And then release it. All the while thinking about it, being aware. How does it feel going in? As we take another breath, can we feel it in our noses, down our windpipes, into our chests? What does it feel like? Where do we feel it? Do we feel full of air? Is there room for more? And then how does it feel to let it go? Either slowly or all at once. And then we can pause for a moment on the out breath, enjoying that sensation of just letting it all go before we breathe in again. And when we do so, let's do so mindfully, meaning we pay attention. This is where we are right now. Breathing in and breathing out. We have interrupted whatever was occupying our minds before we started, and whatever will no doubt occupy them again when we finish. But our lives are happening right now. And this process helps us to be there in the now, undistracted, living the now, where we are. We might continue to think about a special place as if we were there now. How it would feel, the wind, the sun, the clouds. How we would feel there. And let us breathe in whatever image is helpful, or just breathe in the now. And hold on to it. And even think, this is now. This is now. Now. And then let go. On Friday night, I had the pleasure of leading services at Fairmont Temple, where I also had the opportunity to welcome the congregation and offer an intention in the form of a reflection on a passage I will share with you as a way to interrupt ourselves. The passage comes from a very lovely book I recently read, entitled "This is Happiness" by Niall Williams. It is set in rural Ireland, It is set in rural Ireland and is an intricately observed portrait of a mostly forgotten community. Its idiosyncrasies and traditions, its paradoxes and foolishness, its failures and its triumphs. It is an exquisitely witnessed account of humanity in this particular setting in the second half of the 20th century. At one point in the narrative, the title of the book is spoken by one of the characters in an exchange that would not have seemed to predict such a response. The narrator has asked this individual how he can seem so at ease and even content when a quest on which he is engaged has so far yielded very little. The character responds that this is happiness. The narrator is confused by that response at first, but as he reflects upon it, he comes to this conclusion. It was a condensed explanation, but I came to understand him to mean you could stop at, not all, but most of the moments of your life, stop for one heartbeat, and no matter what the state of your mind or heart say, this is happiness because of the simple truth that you were alive to say it. I came to understand him to mean you could stop at, not all, but most of the moments of your life, stop for one heartbeat, and no matter what the state of your mind or your head or heart, say, this is happiness because of the simple truth that you were alive to say it. While I recognize the near impossibility when in the throes of anxiety or serious concern of being able to declare, this is happiness, a teacher of mine once suggested that at such times it might be helpful to ask, is this a burden or a blessing? Even in the midst of overwhelming stress and anxiety, I often had to answer that the source of my concern was a blessing. If we can get to that point, when it actually is a blessing, the acknowledgement that this is happiness may follow fairly easily. It should also be possible to say this is happiness when we recognize that it is a burden that is troubling us. Because once again, we were alive to say it and to deal with it and to hopefully conquer it or at least resolve it. The idea that we might be able to pause at almost any moment of the day and acknowledge that because we are just alive to say it, that renders the moment one of happiness, is a spiritual practice. It may seem to come naturally from a character in a book, but for most of us, it does not come naturally at all. On the contrary, most of us are far too caught up with and caught up in the details and exigencies of our lives. Whether or not we might be experiencing happiness at any given moment is usually the furthest thing from our minds. But therein lies the power of such a practice. The ability to access a greater truth than we are immediately aware of might allow us to conduct our lives with a greater sense of perspective, of distance even from others' immediate, often obscuring needs to which we feel bound. Just as our focus on our breathing trains our minds to live in the here and now, so our understanding that happiness does not require a special occasion, the fulfillment of a dream, or the closing of a deal might allow us to live each moment with a greater sense of purpose, of impact, of meaning. Our sense of ease, of equanimity, of joy even, is not dependent upon external circumstances. It is dependent upon our appreciation of the moment as a gift of breath, of awareness, of life. That cognizance is free because then we control our state of mind from the inside, from our inner reality, rather than feeling constrained by the influence and impact of external events. But this takes practice. We have spent our lives relying on the perceptions of others, of their judgments and their opinions. If we could adopt a spiritual practice in which our sense of well-being emerges from a deep place within, that knows by virtue of our simply breathing in and out that this is happiness, we would truly be in control of our lives. It's not that the opinions of others will have no meaning. It's that they will not have the power they once had. That would be liberating. And it takes a level of spiritual awareness to accomplish such a feat. So let us continue on our journey to spiritual awareness by resuming our breathing. It is a practice. It is a spiritual practice. So let us readopt our positions, our attitudes, our removal of ourselves from anything but the breath. And understand that even as we inhale and exhale with attentiveness, even as we are conscious of something that is unconscious all the time, we recognize that in the consciousness of it is the liberation of it as well. We are making this happen in a certain way. And if we can do this, we can also stop at almost any moment and acknowledge that this is happiness by virtue of simply being alive to say it. I sometimes have the unworthy thought that so-and-so who passed away, usually a close loved one, is freed from the anxiety I might be feeling at that moment, or the concern or the depression of that moment. And then I think that that person would give anything to be alive, even with the difficulties that being alive always presents. By way of conclusion, and hopefully inspiration for the week ahead, I would leave you with another quote from the book. This is Happiness by Niall Williams. He writes, "Books, music, painting are not life, can never be as full, rich, complex, surprising, or beautiful. But the best of them can catch an echo of that, can turn you back to look out the window, go out the door, aware that you've been enriched, that you have been in the company of something alive that has caused you to realize once again how astonishing life is. And you leave the book, gallery, or concert hall with that illumination, which feels, I'm going to say, holy, by which I mean human raptness. So, may you have a good week, a week filled with the knowledge of how astonishing life is. I look forward to seeing you next time. God bless. Be well.